Hello everyone, it's great to see so many of you here. My name is Szymon Chmal and I came to Wrocław from Toruń, like it was said before, specifically to tell you about Astro, a framework for creating content-driven websites. Before I go any further, could those who have already heard about Astro raise their hands? Is there anyone? Okay, so the situation with Astro isn't that bad. In that case, I hope you will learn something new. But before we dive into the topic, let me tell a couple of words about myself. So I believe we can gain a lot by sharing our knowledge and our experiences with others, like-minded people. So that's why I'm here today with you. For over a year, I've been speaking at various conferences and meetups, sharing my knowledge and my experience. Like it was also said, I'm organizer of the Toruń Web Development Meetup, which was yesterday rebranded to GDG Toruń, so Google Developer Group Toruń. On a daily basis, I work with React Native. I have some experience with backend development. In the past, I worked with Java, with Spring Framework, and Angular. So I can say I got some experience in, well, many frameworks and libraries and technologies. But now let's get back to the topic. So we often deal with two types of websites. We create highly interactive applications on one side, and on the second side, we create some content-driven websites. Both have their own sets of challenges and choices. For example, traditional static site generators work well for content-heavy websites, but adding interactive elements can be tricky. So let's see what choices we have when implementing such content-driven website. So we can use Remix or next.js, and that's fine, but the problem with those tools is that those were created with application development in mind, or with development of highly interactive applications. So for example, you need to send some certain amount of JavaScript to your users, and they need to execute it, they need to parse it, so yeah, that's not good. Another option is to use something like Gatsby. Unfortunately, the entry barrier for Gatsby is rather high. Plus, additionally, according to what I read online, its development significantly slowed down at some point, making it not the best choice for the future. And last but not least, we can use some traditional options like static site generators. In this case, well, everything will work fine until the moment that we will need to add something interactive to our site. At that point, we are at our own. It might seem like there is no good choice. That's why Astro was created, because in Astro, you can create websites with no JavaScript at all, by default. But if it's needed, for example, you need to hydrate some component with a button which displays some alert, you can do that. But by default, you send basically nothing. And Astro aims to be a framework with which it is impossible to create slow websites. Sounds brave, doesn't it? Astro is not a newcomer. It's been around for quite a long time, several years at least, and there are many companies using it. I'm not sure if you are able to see that, but yeah, there's Porsche website, Microsoft Fluent Design System, NordVPN, some private websites, React.gg, so the latest React tutorial. There are even some Polish examples, so you can always open Astro website and go through them. There are, I think, 25 pages of basically pre-made websites with Astro. And what sets Astro apart? Basically, like I said, and I will be saying many times today, Astro is particularly focused on content-driven website. This means it's optimized for sites that doesn't include any interactive elements, or those elements are limited. So it's ideal for making blogs, news pages, and pretty much everything that includes content like text, images, and so on. And one of the key features of Astro is its flexibility, because it lets you use your favorite UI framework. So basically, you can use React to create Astro pages. You can use Solid.js to create Astro pages. You can use Svelte to create Astro pages. It's up to you. Yeah, and like I said before, you can, with Astro, create pages without JavaScript by default. It means that your page will load faster. It means that search engines will be able to crawl your websites easily. And content is immediately available to your users without the need to execute the JavaScript first. And finally, something you need to know when starting to work with Astro. Astro uses multi-page application architecture. That's something it's nothing new. We used it before with PHP, for example. And the truth is that modern browsers are really good at optimizing navigation. So when you go back and forth, there's this BF cache in Chrome. So pages will load instantaneously without any delay. Yeah, and Astro integrates with many libraries. Not only UI libraries, but also some different tools like Tailwind, like PartyTown. And what's best about that is you don't need to install them by yourself. You can simply run a command. For example, I need React. So I run Astro add React. I need Tailwind. So I will run Astro add Tailwind. And that's basically it. You have now React in your Astro. You have now Tailwind in your Astro. There's no need to configure them manually. Of course, you can reconfigure certain options, but by default, it's just working. Yeah, and Astro uses this common file-based routing, the same like Expo router that was mentioned before. Yeah, so maybe we'll skip this part because it works basically the same. You create pages in special pages directory, and depending on the name, a different URL will be created. You can create like normal URLs, you can use numbers, you can use some dynamic parts in your URL, and you can create, let's say, wildcard rules, which will be matched to pretty much anything. And you can use, pretty much anything to create those pages. You can use plain HTML files. You can use Markdown from out of the box, it's built in. You can use Astro components, which we'll talk about in a second. And you can also create pages with, for example, React components. And Astro components were created to make it possible to create those JavaScript-free pages without any additional library. You can install React, like I said, but it's not needed because Astro has some templating engine built in. So when you create Astro component, the first part on the top of your component, it's JavaScript part, which is executed on server side. You can safely call third-party APIs. You can safely query your database in here. It's guaranteed that nothing will leak to the client side. And then there's the second part in which you define how your component will look like in browser. So for example, you can use variables from JavaScript. You define here. You can use props passed to your component. You can import components from other libraries and pass props to them. You can also mix HTML with JavaScript. That's also not a problem. And with help of special directives Astro gives us, you can, for example, create your class dynamically. So there's no need to concatenate strings by yourself. It's built in. And if there's a case that you need to send JavaScript, Astro also gives us opportunity to do that. The only thing you have to do is to create a script tag and put your JavaScript code inside of it. The best part is you can use TypeScript there, you can import things there. Astro will process this code and make sure the correct JavaScript will be sent to the browser. It's worth mentioning that such code will be executed only once, no matter how many instances of the component are there rendered on the page. So you need to know that, for example, you need to query for all buttons with such attribute, and then iterate over each to create some effect. Yeah. I keep mentioning that Astro is content-driven framework, and it's content-focused. So that's why there are content collections in Astro, and those allow us to group your content together. For example, if you have articles in your page, in your website, and you have something like authors or maybe some images like image gallery, you can group them together with content collections. And for example, you can enforce schemas. So by using this part, the schema part, you can use Zod to implement such schema validation, and then you are sure that all your markdown files will contain this metadata. And Astro will not allow you to basically build if such data is missing. Also, Astro will generate TypeScript types for you. So you can import, for example, block collection type, and you will see all those metadata with correct types generated by Astro. The only part left is to export it in collections object, and that's basically it. Astro will now allow you to query for those documents. Astro supports pagination out of the box, and you can easily render those pages, those markdown files or JSON files in your Astro pages or other components. When it comes to images, those are also optimized by Astro automatically. The only part you need to do is basically use image component, and Astro will convert it into many modern formats like WebP. It will scale it down, it will produce multiple versions of it. So yeah, it's pretty convenient, and it also works basically like in next.js. It's pretty much the same thing. Yeah, and I said that you can use your favorite framework. That's true. And sometimes you need to hydrate because, like I said, for example, you have a button, you need to display some information about your page when somebody clicks on this button. So Astro uses something called islands of interactivity. And this is something special because usually we are not seeing what I see. So you need to imagine that there's a page. There are rectangles, for some reason they are not being shown, only those animated are being shown. But yeah, you can choose a part of your page and say, okay, I will use React there, and I want this to be hydrated. But there's no reason, maybe there is no limitation from Astro that you cannot use Angular, for example, for a second island. You can use Solid.js, you can use Svelte, you can use Preact, so pretty much everything will work. Maybe not everything, because there need to be an integration package for that, but still there are many libraries supported by Astro. Yeah, and you can control when your component will be hydrated. So if you need your component to be hydrated as soon as possible, you use client load. If it's not needed, if it can wait, for example, for browser to be idle, you can use client idle. If your component is located, let's say, under the initial viewport, so user need to scroll to it, you can use client visible, and Astro will automatically hydrate your component when it gets into the view. You can also use media queries, so Astro will hydrate when the media query is met. And last but not least, if for some reason you don't want to render your component on the server side, you can use client only to force Astro to render and hydrate your component on client side. And Astro can operate in several modes. You can pre-render all of your pages, so you will produce HTML files for each. But also you can switch to on-demand rendering. You can switch to server-side rendering, or you can use a hybrid mode, which uses some server-side generation and some server-side rendering. And to change operating mode of Astro, you need to open a configuration file and then switch a property from static, for example, to hybrid. And now, when you create your page, you export pre-render constant to say to Astro that this page needs to be pre-rendered, and the rest will be server-side rendered. But this particular one, for example, it's static because it's, let's say, about page. This one can be safely built at build time, and it doesn't need to be refreshed. Yeah, and there are certain cases when you need, for example, when you need to call some third-party API from your UI components. And of course, you don't want to send your API keys to frontend, to client side, because of obvious reasons. So Astro has something called Astro endpoints. Basically, you can create API endpoints in your Astro application and then call from your UI components to Astro, which will serve a purpose of proxy. And how to do that? Basically, you create a JavaScript file or a TypeScript file. You export a function called get, post, patch, whatever HTTP method you need. And then in the body, you basically do whatever you want. You can call APIs, you can call databases, but you need to respond with a response object. And for example, in this case, I'm stringifying to JSON some array of pages I get from Astro. And the result is, as expected, a list of posts in my applications. Yeah, I said that Astro uses multi-page application. And normally in case of multi-page applications, there's no way to animate transitions because browser loads the second page and then performs a hard navigation. So no state is persisted. It's basically like you would open a second window of your browser. But there's something called View Transitions API, which is being now implemented in, for example, Safari and in Firefox. It's supported partially in Chrome right now. So for example, if I go there, you will see that when I click, for example, well, maybe the frame rate is not best, but you can clearly see that the views are animating. And this is Astro. This is multi-page application with view transitions enabled. So that's something you can do to trigger users that your page is not multi-page application, and it will look basically better. So when you want to enable view transitions, you basically import view transitions component and then put it into your header. And then you can put custom directives, transition name and transition animate, to transit certain elements, HTML elements, between pages. On the right side, you can see this little video, which again is not playing on your site for some reason, but you will see that the counter would be counting up, and when I switch from home page to second page, it will be reset, because that's how Astro works. It doesn't, it wants your components to behave in the same way, like you would expect them to work in MPA mode. And what's nice, when you have your components in client-only mode, you can basically add a second directive named transition persist, and this way you will be able to persist your components, their state, between navigations. And this time it's clearly visible that counter is not being reset when I navigate. So, which framework should you use right now? In my opinion, Astro is something that we should look at and maybe consider as a replacement for next.js, because size matters. With next.js, you have to accept that a certain amount of JavaScript will be sent to browser. And that doesn't sound like a big problem, right? After all modern devices are, well, they perform well, right? Wrong. I mean, in Poland, it's not that bad. But there are certain countries where iPhones are not common. I mean, it's not a common thing. Okay, we can always take our phones. We mostly use high-end devices or medium devices, but there are countries where low-end devices are popular. And for those devices, as you can see, performance isn't that good. And why should we care? Because time is money. There are studies saying that, for example, the conversion rate drops by an average of 4% with each additional second of loading time. So it doesn't sound bad for, I don't know, page selling t-shirts for $10 each. Well, you will lose some dollars, I don't know, $5, $4. That's not a big thing, right? The problem is in bigger scale. If you sell something for millions of dollars, then those 4% are, well, it's several hundred, several $1,000. So that's beginning to hurt. The second study says that nearly 70% of consumers admit that page loading speed affects their willingness to purchase from a seller. And that's actually me. I can admit, I'm doing that. When I have to wait, I don't know, 10 seconds for a page to load, I go back and look for another page selling the same stuff. Because, well, that's me. And this study confirms that there are many people like me. I want to emphasize one thing. Next.js is a good framework, but it's a versatile framework and you have to pay for that. You will pay with JavaScript being sent to the client. But sometimes we don't need such versatile tools. We need something specialized, something small, something to create this page and don't send this enormous amount of JavaScript. So Astro will be best for e-commerce websites, for portfolios, for blogs, for landing pages, and for example, for company sites. So, is it worth getting to know Astro? I think definitely yeah. Because when you start with Astro, you don't need to read dozen pages of documentation. You can start with a really small example, and that will keep you going. And then, when you progress, you will opt in into some special features. And you can use your favorite UI library for free, so you don't need to even learn this Astro syntax for Astro components. You can use React, for example. And yeah, like I said, you can then opt in into some complex features like view transitions, but that's up to you. There's nothing forcing you to do so. And finally, I want to highlight that Astro is great for content-driven websites, but it's definitely not the best choice for next Facebook. I mean, it's built to drive content-driven websites, not something that's highly interactive. Okay, so we reached the end, and I'm really glad that I managed to fit in time. So I hope I managed to give you something new about Astro, because many of you has raised your hands, and encourage you to consider using Astro for your next project. And yeah, we have now time for questions. So are there any questions?
I had several.
Oh.
I
should expect that.
I was preparing during your talk because I know that there is no questions, but I hope you will have some. But you answered all of them. So I had questions, SSR versus static generation, like where does it land? And you said like somewhere in between. Basically, you can choose per page. Mm-hmm. What do you want to use? I was going to give a shout out for island architecture. Like that's a huge thing that you can use. Different teams working in different frameworks on the same website.
Yeah, I would say it can be used for micro frontends.
Yeah,
because basically you can ship some small JavaScript files, for example, to share information between those islands, and then you have micro frontend.
Yeah. That's
yeah,
great.
so you can use Astro for that.
The transitions look awesome, and the API is very similar to what we have in React Native as well.
Yeah, but still, they are only supporting Chrome. What Astro does, it basically tries to polyfill those view transitions. So they will work in Safari. They will work in a little differently, but you will get pretty much the same result.
Okay, so we are asking for some questions. Do you have any other questions? Yes. Kuba.
There's
please.
one.
Yeah.
So you said that...
wait for Mike.
Oh, it's coming.
Thank you. Great talk. So you said it's very easy to opt in, right? And then try to add features gradually. So, I don't have experience with Astro. Is there like a clear borderline where you start, growing your app and it's becoming too interactive and maybe it's time to opt out? And how difficult would that be?
It depends what do you exactly mean by opt-out. Because when your page becomes interactive, then usually you would, for example, create some pages that are static by nature. So you would have about page, landing page, and so on. And you will have this wildcard route in Astro, and there you will mount your React application, like normal client-side React application. And that will work just fine. Like you don't need to use Astro at all. You can use Astro only for those parts that are static by nature, and for example, to optimize images. So that's the way. And people are doing that, and they are saying that it's really good. So I hope I answered your question.
So there are no like tight dependencies between, for example, the part built with React and the static pages built with Astro. I can just detach it easily.
Yeah, they are totally independent of each other.
Awesome.
That's because of island architecture.
All right, thank you.
We have another questions there. Awesome.
Okay, so first row.
Hello. Heard a lot about Astro, but like never touch. A question about image optimizations. You told that like a lot. Yes, but in next.js we have a limits, and after some kind of like 5,000, you need to pay for that. Any limits for Astro?
It's happening locally. When you build your application, there's this package named Sharp, I believe, which is basically invoked for each image, and Astro uses that to convert to those fancy formats and so on. So there's no cost besides the time you spend on building.
So it helps. It happens on build time, not on for example, on
Exactly, it happens on build
How
time.
it impact build time?
Once again?
How it's impact build time?
Well, if you have several images, then it's not bad. If there are many images, then of course you will end up with minutes of build time. So at some point, it's better to use specialized services like, for example, ImageX, I think it's called, which will transform your images on the fly. Like you ask ImageX for an image, and if there's no cached version, it will basically transform it on the fly and return to the browser. And it happens like you don't need to even do anything. It's on the service side. So the browser handles that for you.
Okay, thank you. One more question. Is there any well-known integrations with good integrations with CMS?
There are few, but I cannot say anything about them. Because with Astro, I was working, for example, on my personal page. I was experimenting with view transitions a lot. There's even a bug right now in iOS Safari. For some reason, view transitions are bugging out on buttons, and I'm trying to fix that with Astro team. But yeah, I don't know about CMS. I'm sure that there are integrations for that, at least one. But I'm not sure if it's official one or it's a community-driven one.
But in general, the way we'll be using the API routes like Next.js one, but from Astro.
Once again?
But like the recipe will be to use API routes that Astro provide to query data and show it, or
you can always query from your JavaScript part of your Astro component, because this is guaranteed to be run on server side. And so where you are building your application, statically generating your pages, it will call to your CMS of your choice and fetch data. But you can also do it in your API endpoints or directly from UI, whatever you like.
Okay, and one more. Do you have experience with migration from Next.js to Astro or?
Not really. But to be honest, it shouldn't be that bad because routing is pretty much the same. So that would work out of the box.
Like we're talking about pages router, not app router.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, loading and so on. It shouldn't be that hard, but I can't say anything about that. I didn't migrate like large pages, just my experiments.
Okay, thank you.
There are two more, I think.
Let's take two more and let's go to the next. Thanks for a lot of questions. That's great. That's why we're here. And Szymon will be here, so
I will
continue
stay here
the
to
talk
the end,
about
so
migration.
you can always find me in pretty much anywhere.
Okay, hi. Nice presentation. And I wanted to ask you about the hydration errors, and have you had any issues with that?
With hydration issues, well, in Astro, I mean, when I use Next.js in the past, I have experienced some. In Astro, the same. If you do anything like, for example, when you try to serialize your date on server side and then send serialized, let's say it's 2nd of May, and in some cases you can experience hydration error because, for example, it's 23, 10 minutes to midnight, and for example, in some other country it's after the midnight, so there will be hydration error. So it's not like Astro will help you with that. It will basically happen for any framework, and there's nothing like additional in Astro to prevent that.
Okay, so it's basically
it's a React thing, and
okay.
Yeah, nothing can help with that.
Okay, thank you.
So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you want to ask some more questions, I will be around, so you will easily find me.
Thanks a lot. Great talk.